Welcome to Wild, Women in Lending Determined to Make an Impact. I'm your host, Robin Lavasser. They say our biggest fear is not that we are inadequate. It's being powerful beyond measure. In this podcast, I will share how to break through imaginary ceilings, lean into success, discovering your purpose, and understanding how to create the business and life of your dreams. From failures to triumphs and all the tactics in between, let's jump into the wild arena together. Welcome back to Wild with Robin Lavasser, talking today about one of the biggest game changers in the business, in sales in general, but really in influence. And one of the things that I just want to start with for a minute is the fact that 98% of people are emotions first, logic second. There's about 2% that are logic first, emotion second. But decisions are often made. Markets are often happening, political decisions, all the things that happen really across the world come first from emotions over logic. That's just the facts, right? And it's often because that's how things get messy, if you will. When we can add logic after emotion, we're in a really good spot. Now, would things be a little easier if we could start with logic? Yes, but let's be honest, that's just not how the world works. And so how do we in sales reverse that and use that knowledge in a way that makes influence easier for us? And I don't say influence as in manipulation. I say influence as in strategic consulting, what we do and how we want to partner, whether it be with a real estate agent or with a client and a client to choose us as their actual loan officer. When we are in that space and we are leading first with logic versus emotion, I can promise you we're in an uphill battle. People's brains automatically process information with quick yeses or nos. I trust or I don't trust right now. And when we're in data processing, it's so easy to just go in and out, in and out, in and out. When you are in an emotional state, it's like somebody, have you ever shared screen with somebody and given them access to your computer? I want you to think about this analogy for a minute. You can see your computer, you know what you're doing, but all of a sudden they take over and they are driving on your system. When you can open somebody up with a signature story, it's like you're the one driving and their head and heart versus them choosing the narratives and the writing and how they're driving. And so it's so incredibly powerful. And it's one that I see people miss a lot. I'm incredibly grateful. I always give reference to Rene Rodriguez and what he does in his Amplify classes. I've taken many of them. I've invested a ton of time and money into becoming hopefully masterful at signature stories. And I taught a class recently at our 10X Summit, and it was such a fun class to do because everyone was anxious to find a few signature stories. And so you get some in your pocket, if you will. And I like to refer to it as possibly your golf bag or your toolbox where you go, oh, I've got that tool right here. And again, it's not used for manipulation. It's used to help people see you. It humanizes you. It builds an emotional connection from them to you and you to them. It anchors the beliefs that you have, and it helps anchor those beliefs in being believable to the client. It sets you apart because it adds memory bank that in a world of numbers and appointments and all sorts of people in the loan transaction and real estate transaction in general, it sets you apart because it's opened both their head and their heart. And there's such a win in that in general that it allows for them to hear you, feel you, and remember you differently amidst the crowd of everyone involved in them buying a home or refinancing a home. There's such a huge win from it. So how do you tell a signature story? Well, first I will tell you, you want to start with what we call frame message tie down. And I'll give you a couple examples of this today, and hopefully it lands well with you in terms of signature stories. So when you think about a frame and a message and a tie down, you think about, hey, what's the frame? What am I trying to get across to somebody? And it might be a belief. It might be and the best example that I can give you for a second is, let's say that I am meeting with a realtor and they are having a hard time getting buyers to choose to engage in this market because of home prices, because of fears around budget, because of interest rates. They're having a struggle overcoming that objection. And so they feel like their business is maybe slower or not where they want it to be. And you're the loan officer coming in and sitting down with that realtor and saying, hey, start using me and I'll make a difference. Now imagine this. Imagine if I sat down with a realtor and went, well, you haven't worked with me yet. I'll help you get first-time home buyers. I'll give them the information so they're not as scared, and you'll close more deals if you work with me. It's not all that influential if you're being honest, right? It's almost argumentative. There could be a piece that feels salesy or entitled, demanding, maybe trying to one up, if you will, like I could do it even if you're not able to do it. And so what you're saying is, I want you to close more deals, Mr. or Miss Realtor, and I think I can help. But how it's being heard when you don't open them up emotionally is logic driven of, hey, you're not able to overcome those objections, let me do it type of circumstance. Yeah, it gets them to the end result of the payday, but you're asserting yourself in a way that maybe is off-putting to them. It's almost like, and Renee says this all the time, and so I always want to give credit, but he'll say, imagine telling a joke and nobody laughing. That's lacking influence. It's lacking timing. It's lacking opening somebody up, right? And you've seen people tell a joke that would have been funny shy of who's actually telling it. And they botched it and it's no longer funny. I want the stories that you tell to leave a mark with people and to help create the movement, if you will, i.e. the influence that you're trying to convey, because you're doing it not for your own benefit, but ultimately for theirs. The truth is, it's always a good time to buy real estate. So if you're sitting down with an agent and they're saying, hey, I don't know, buyers are scared right now. They just don't want to get off the fence. And they're, especially first-time home buyers. I've got a lot of them, just affordability. They're freaking out. They want to wait for rates. I don't blame them. I think rates are high. I hear that kind of rhetoric a lot. So imagine if you're the loan officer and you say, can I tell you how I help with that, how I assist with first-time home buyers? Because I agree, even when rates are low, buyers are scared, especially when they're doing it for the very first time. So can I tell you how I help with that? When I'm meeting with a first-time home buyer, if you're open, I'm going to tell you a story for a moment. In 2002, my husband and I bought our very first home. We had a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old triplets. So when you say our plates were full, they were really full. And we were renting a home up on a hill that was on a busy street, had a terrible yard for our kids, had popcorn ceilings, low ceilings, bad heating and cooling. Nothing about it said, this feels like our home. And of course, after you have children, I think everybody probably feels this way. You want something to be yours if you haven't bought a house yet. And you want to do things like paint your kids' walls and make a nursery and all of these things. But I have to tell you, when my husband and I decided, gosh, we'd love to own a home, we were broke, meaning we felt like we were living paycheck to paycheck. We couldn't afford to make a higher payment in our minds than what we were paying for rent. It never felt like there was enough. We had to scramble when emergencies came up. I just didn't know how it was actually going to be possible to get into a home. And I was in the business. I was lucky for me. I sat down with some great realtors that were using the loan officer that I was processing for at the time. And they really educated me, walked me through a lot of things. And then I was able to sit down with the loan officer. What's great is we were still scared. We were scared to death, and rightfully so, right? We really were living paycheck to paycheck. We didn't have a lot of savings. We didn't even have really great credit. We had a lot of things that we were working on. We bought our first house for $135,000, and our interest rates were in the high sixes at the time. We never in a million years thought we could afford it. And I know $135,000 seems really cheap to you right now in 2025. But the truth is, if you took back to wages in 2002, the scale is still the same, right? It still feels the same. And so we took on this house payment. And I remember just being so relieved because we were moving in December 14th that we wouldn't have a payment due until February, like just feeling so relieved. And we moved into the house. And of course, it's, 2 weeks before Christmas. We have young children. I want the tree and the lights and all of the things. And I'm feeling overwhelmed about the budget, but excited that we closed. And then I thought for sure we would fall flat on our face making the payment. And yet between the loan officer's advisement, the computer keeping things at bay, right? There's qualifications that go into a home loan. Sure enough, we came up with the money every single month. And there were hard months for sure. And there were surprises. And there were some things that took place that made things feel like a little extra squeeze, but we never missed a mortgage payment. In fact, we not only never missed a mortgage payment, we didn't really increase our debt. I think we probably ate out a little bit less, but it's not like we never had pizza on a Friday night. But here's the coolest part. Scared as we were, we don't come from a family that's wealthy. We don't come from any sort of inheritance. 3 years later, we sold that home and we ended up making $75,000. We never in a million years would have at our young ages in our 20s, right? At this point, our kids are, the triplets are 3, Griffin is 5, and we all of a sudden have $75,000 $100,000 that we never could have saved, nor were we saving, but the house forced us into it. The house allowed for us to not only have a home for those 3+ years with our kids, that we painted walls and did yard work together and reinvested our tax refund, which increased from home ownership, but it allowed us to build a foundation to get into the next home that we wanted. It stabilized our family on the whole, and it's continued to provide for us, helping us build wealth and create stability and a true home for our children, because we decided one day, scared to death, to get out of renting and become homeowners. So you as clients, yes, I know that you are scared. You have every right to be scared. There should be a healthy fear there. I promise you, I'm going to guide you the way somebody did for me back in 2002, and you will not lose on the investment in yourself and becoming a homeowner. I promise you, you will win. So we'll have that conversation. Now you can see that as a signature story. Imagine if I said instead, that took probably about 4.5 minutes to tell that story. Imagine if instead I said, oh my gosh, my husband and I were scared too. Don't worry about it. We were fine. We made the payment. You guys are going to do great. The level of influence goes so far down. Friends, family, shoot, in my marriage, I probably pull out signature stories. Like, they're all over the place for me, because I've learned the art of telling stories to influence, and what it can do, not only more fulfilling because you feel like they're open and listening, and then hopefully you can drag some story out of them, even if it's not in the perfect frame message tie down format, but you feel like, hey, we've opened up a level of trust and vulnerability, sharing, if you will, that the numbers are all important, but we've humanized one another, and we hopefully know, like, and trust, right? The secret to every sale. And now some magic can happen. So whether it's with a referral partner, it's, I have a loan officer in our office, and I'll close with this little story. I was teaching a class on signature stories, and I have a loan officer in our office who is actually a paraplegic. So from the waist down, he is paralyzed. And he's actually a branch manager for us, and he is an incredible man. I couldn't have more respect for him, and the heart that he brings to the table. He's just gritty. He's so aware of other people's needs at all times. And I'm always in awe of how he has dealt with his own disability, if you will, and turned it into something of strength. And so we were talking about signature stories, and he said, I really want to learn my signature story. And I said, well, what's important to you? And he said, taking care of people is important to me. And I said, why? And so he sat for a minute and really thought about it. And we built a signature story that was 100% true. So this young man was in a horrible boating accident. I think it was around Memorial Day, but don't quote me exactly, around Memorial Day weekend, when he was 17 years old. And he broke his back and he became paralyzed. And he was luckily able to be shipped to kind of a high-end rehab hospital. And he was in a room that was a double room. So a curtain is pulled between him and another gentleman that actually was, broken back, those kind of things as well. But the gentleman was a quadriplegic. So nothing moved from neck down in his world. Now our loan officer branch manager, he's waist down. And so he said, the guy right next to me, I could tell, was pushing on his call button, which was up by his head. They had this specified call button for paraplegics where he was pushing with his head. If you can imagine laying in bed, not being able to move anything but your neck and trying to push a call button. And our loan officer is laying in a bed next to him on the other side of the curtain, hearing the ding, knowing the gentleman needs something. He's paralyzed from the waist down, and he's only 17. And this gentleman that's pushing the call buttons, like in his late 20s, 30s, if I remember correctly. And finally he says, well, gosh, I'm going to go check on him because the nurse wasn't coming. And so he got out of bed into his wheelchair by himself, and he wheeled over to the gentleman who had been ringing his call button on repeat. And he says, hey, I'm going to make up a name. Hey, James, did you need something? And James says, I do. My nose itches. This gentleman couldn't itch his own nose. And the 17-year-old young man who had recently become paralyzed said, are you okay if I itch it for you? And he says, yes, please. And he reaches up and he itches it. And so as this young man's telling me this story, our branch manager, our loan officer is telling me this story. It's him, right? He's the one who is paralyzed from the waist down. He said, how do I turn something like that into a signature story? And I said, well, what's important to you in it? And he said, I see people. I listen to what their needs are, and I make sure they're taken care of. And I said, so imagine if you sat down with clients and said, hey, obviously you can see I'm in a wheelchair. Let me tell you a little bit about that. And tell them the story about how you took care of James that day and itched his nose. And then let them know there's going to be a lot of moments in this where you want to ring your call button, if you will, and you're going to need your nose itched. My niche is taking care of people. My niche is noticing that people need things, even so small as a nose itch, that, metaphorically, like, I love to take care of people. And I have recognized that this is a very big process. There are a lot of things going on. There are lenders that do nothing but quote rates, quote fees, and push papers through the system. I make sure that you become a client of mine, that I truly know exactly what your needs are and how I can meet them at the highest level. And I look forward to taking really good care of you throughout a very stressful process that I promise you, you won't have to ring your call button all that often because I'll already be there. So there's a way to turn a signature story into a frame message tie down in almost every circumstance if you really start to think about it. And again, that story actually brings him to a space where he becomes more human to the clients, but he feels good and fulfilled in telling it versus just doing transactions, surface level conversation. So I would challenge you to invest in yourself on signature stories. I would challenge you, if you're stuck on it, reach out. It's one of my favorite topics. We'll be teaching it again in October at our 10X Summit. It's absolutely a game changer, not only to hopefully humanize and fill the hearts of your clients and referral partners and other people, but hopefully it fills your own heart as well, because you get to share a piece of yourself, maybe even a piece of other people, with people, and it will make an impact and make a difference. If this was helpful, I hope you share it. We'll see you on the next Wild.